I think it's really awesome that with all of these characters that these brilliant actresses are playing, and you know, that there's, it's interrogating, every single one is interrogating the notion of what it is to be good in a way that's really cool.
Got four very different roles here. We've got the former English teacher suffering from dementia in a care home in crisis during the pandemic, a young woman dealing with a terrible trauma who's moved into an extremely unusual house with its own intriguing history, a privileged student who may or may not have committed murder, and a flighty 1940s serial dater with a trail of discarded men in her wake. So some very deserving nominees here. And I think if it's all right, we'll start with how you first got involved with these particular projects and what drew you to these characters. And I wondered if, Cathy, you'd like to start us off. Help was such an important show last year. Tell us how you became a part of it.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you for asking me. As with everything, it's an audition, and this one was on Zoom, and then I got a recall. So I read the script and then did the Zoom, and my agent was really keen on this as well. And then we discussed, you know, the age of the character. And I said, Mark, you know, I don't want to be taking work away from an older actress. I want to be acting, hopefully, if I've got the energy, until I'm about 80. Would you believe that, you know? But he said, no, I want to work with you, because I had that on my conscience a bit. I tried to talk myself out of the job, which is crazy, isn't it? But I have, you know, I know what the situation is for women over a certain age in the business. So he said, no, I really want to work with you. And part was not written as you know, as specifically a black person, but I just thought, okay, she was a teacher in the 70s and 80s in Liverpool, and I remember what it was like then, and there was no such thing as, you know, decolonizing the curriculum or getting black books on the curriculum. And I thought she may have had quite a lonely time of it back then in the 80s, and that may have contributed to some of the stress. So we talked about getting black writers, poets, because as a black teacher, she would know probably something from the black canon. So they were in agreement. Jack Thorne was in agreement with that. And we looked around for writers, discussed Derek Walcott. We couldn't get that poem, as well as including the other poems that were in there. So John A. God kindly said we could use his, one of his, for nothing. So it was wonderful because it developed as time went on.
Sounds like you brought a lot to the role beyond what was in the initial script, which is definitely talk about more later. Jessica, how about you? How did you get involved with The Girl Before? What drew you to playing Emma?
Yeah, similarly to Cathy, I also had a Zoom audition. It was actually one of the first Zoom auditions that I had done with a director before. And yeah, I mean, everything that could have potentially went wrong. Like I was so nervous. I completely blanked out on the first take. The second take, the doorbell rang like 3 times. The third take, my daughter fell off the trampoline in the other room. Like, audition from hell. Bless Amy Jackson. I would imagine she probably deleted all of those and sent like the 6th one in. And yeah, like had a recall. That whole process, got all of the episodes, and yeah, just sat down and read all of them back to back. Instantly fell in love with you know, not just my character, but the whole story. The fact that there was like the time difference between my character's called Emma and Gugu's character who plays Jane, but like seeing all the similarities but the differences and the relationships, the different types of relationships that they have with the same people, and yeah, I mean, it was based off of a book of the same title written by J.P. Delaney, which I hadn't read, but like I did my research, and like, you know, it's like a bestseller. And yeah, I mean, I knew instantly that I wanted to be a part of it. I almost kind of, yeah, wasn't sure if I would get it, because I thought this would just be an absolute dream come true, and it was, because yeah, obviously I got it, and here we are.
A very good job too that you got it, because you're brilliant in the role. Celine, Showtrial, a bit like The Girl Before, has a bit of a twisty narrative going on. There's some flashing backwards and forwards. Did you also audition on Zoom?
Yeah. Originally, I did a self-tape, and it was a self-tape in lockdown. So I actually got a friend to record the other line and was doing it basically solo because I was living alone. And that was a weird way to audition. And then the recall was on Zoom, which I think is my only Zoom audition. I don't think I've had any others. They're really weird. Yeah, they're very weird. Anyway, and then the character immediately appealed to me because she is sort of built up to, like, immediately you hate her, like immediately, like you're just like, oh, and then you break, and then the challenge and what intrigued me was breaking that down. And, you know, obviously a snap judgment is most of the time not 100% reliable. Obviously we're more complex than that as human beings. So I think it's actually quite rare as a woman to get the opportunity to play characters who, you know, aren't fully good or fully bad. Maybe things are changing, but I think that, you know, that complexity is something that I was really drawn to.
Yeah, I think things are definitely changing, and probably partly because people like Emily are not just acting in the show that they're nominated for, but also writing and directing. So Emily, I take it was a slightly different route to you for you to this role, because you were writing originally. Were you always planning on appearing in the show?
Well, yeah, I mean, I basically just gave myself the part. I thought I didn't make myself audition. And I felt like, if, you know, this may never happen again. You know, I've written this thing, and then I found myself directing it. I didn't write it intending it to direct it, because I had never directed anything before, but it happened that door opened for me, in no small part thanks to Lily James, who was the person that suggested that. And so suddenly I was directing this show, and I thought, well, yeah, this may never happen again. And I think it's so hard to get jobs as an actor. I thought, I'm damned if I'm not going to give myself a part, because I've written this, I might as well. And I did, and I gave myself this part of the Bolter, partly just because, in a way, she sort of partly because it was doable. You know, I could it was manageable. It was just a couple of days each episode that and they were very contained scenes, but also in a way because she sort of symbolized what I loved about the book and about the material, is that she really is a woman. What I think partly what Nancy Mitford does in this book is she really interrogates what it is to be a mother. And I think it's been, up until really recently, a big taboo in our culture to you know, you can't really be a bad mother on screen or in fiction without being a horrible, detestable person. Up until very recently, I think Maggie Gyllenhaal did a lot for the cause of bad mothering with her film recently. But I was really drawn to the Pursuit of Love is littered with bad mothers, and they're all really likable. And I think the history of the universe has been littered with bad fathers who have been heroic, and you know, starting with Odysseus on, and people still sing songs about Odysseus, you know. So anyway, I felt like this character is a heroine in a way, even though she's totally shameless, she's totally kind of selfish, and has no guilt, and is a really pretty lame mother, but to be celebrated as a kind of a life force. And I love the way that the book did that. And so this character sort of symbolized the essence of what I felt was important about the book. But having given myself this job, I got really cold feet, and I kept trying to fire myself as we were getting closer and closer to the to shooting it. I was just like, the hell do I think I am? I just cannot do this. Like, this is just way too weird and greedy, and I can't be in this thing and write it and be directing it. And I just had terrible visions of myself running around with a sort of wig on, a ridiculous wig, trying to run to the monitor and direct myself. And I was just like, no. And I kept trying to fire myself. About 3 times I went to the producers and I was like, you've got to set me free. Please, can I not be the bolter? I just can't do it. And they wouldn't let me. And then it was really hard, actually. It was really hard being both in the scene and directing the scene. And I felt like I just didn't show up for anyone on those days. I was just like, I just looked like I had a 1,000-mile stare, it was, but at the same time, I'm incredibly grateful to them for not letting me fire myself. And I did, ultimately, the whole spirit of the show in some way was sort of, I hope, channeling through the bolter as I was doing those scenes. But yeah, at the time I was just like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Everyone must just think I'm just so weird. But anyway.
Well, I think I speak for everyone that I'm very glad that you didn't sack yourself from that role. I would happily watch a spin-off called Bolter. Maybe we can get that in motion. Jessica, I want to pick up on what we were talking about with this sort of traumatic subject matter. The Girl Before gets very dark, in particular on the topic of toxic relationships, which is obviously something you're familiar with because of your arc on EastEnders. How do you approach a story like that, and how do you kind of take care of yourself in the moment as well when you're performing such difficult material?
Yeah. Research, conversations. As I said, I worked with a therapist prior to shooting, which was incredibly helpful, to be able to try and understand, because not only was my character going through these things, it was like, she was going through them in secret. So there was like that layer behind the layer of, her kind of her masked character that I needed to figure out kind of separately. And yeah, I mean, I again, like similarly to what I did on EastEnders and like working with charities and things like that, I think, my main thing with a character like that, like the thing that drives me is that I just want to be able to do it in a way in which, if there's an audience member watching who's able to relate to what my character is going through, sees like truth in it. And, I want to be able to represent like women in these situations in a way that feels true. So that was incredibly important. And just in terms of looking after myself, one of the things that I actually did to prep, other than like read the script a million times, was it was like a tool, if you like, that I got from an acting coach called Giles Foreman. And basically, read the script loads of times, and then I kind of assigned my character theme tunes to her emotions. And then I'd go through all the scenes, and then it's like, okay, cool. How does she feel right now in this scene? How does she feel in this scene? Is she happy here? Is she sad here? And then I would learn my lines to the song, which was sad, or to the song, which was happy. And then before we would, like when we would be on set, before we'd do the scene, I'd listen to that song, and it was just a way for me to like instantly access those feelings and the emotions, because the song would trigger it all, because because of the prep work assigned to it. And then as soon as the scene was done, it was like cut back to me, back to Jess, asking for a toilet break or a snack, and yeah, just like that I think was super helpful. I know sometimes it's helpful to like maybe stay in character for a little bit longer, but I think, yeah, like with a storyline like that is so emotionally kind of demanding, it was, yeah, I would have been incredibly tired had I stayed in it, I think, and just kind of like switching off, chilling out, having a bath. At the end of the day.
Yeah, I imagine it would be very intense and quite draining to try and keep that up in between takes if you take care of yourself.
So many coffees were drank.
Celine, Talitha is such a complex character, and as you said, she's often quite obnoxious, at least initially when we first meet her. And so much of the plot hinges on her likability or her unlikability. What did you make of her, and do you think that characters need to be likable or that viewers need to like them?
No, I don't. I think that it's a bit of a trap to think. I don't know. I think they've got to be intriguing. You've got to want to spend time with them. But I think likability is too subjective. I think with likability, I feel like sometimes we're chasing this thing that like people like people for different reasons. Not everyone. It's like sometimes your best friend has a friend that you're like, how I don't get on with that person, but you can get on. Like it's too difficult to chase, I think. So the only thing that was important for me in preparing her was honesty, and within the genre that it's operating, how much we're giving when, and how much that keeps the audience guessing, but always anchoring that in a place of honesty. So for example, a lot of the obnoxiousness that we see at the beginning, because of the way that she dresses and because of the way that she sounds and because of the way she wears her jacket, which is so irritating, we just assume that she's basically this posh bitch that we're like, yeah. But then actually, I consulted an ISVA and independent sexual violence advisor who follow women who've experienced rape and sexual assault through court cases. And acting out is one of the sort of two main ways that that women who have been abused in their childhood behave. And so, there is a different story behind why she is the way that she is. And I found it so interesting how when a lot of the reviews were written after only the first episode, and a lot of the media fell into that same trap of being like, because of who she is and because of who her father is, she behaves like that, like X. And actually, there is a why explanation. It's a long, very, very long-winded answer, but yeah, basically, no, I don't think characters need to be likable, because I don't think that's. I just don't. I don't think that we all like the same things, or the same things.
It wasn't long-winded at all. I think it's a question that warrants long answers, and I'd love to ask the other nominees what they think about that, because I think it's something that, especially with female characters, has often cropped up in the past. I wonder what you think about your characters' likability. Do you ever find yourselves defending your characters?
I was just going to say that I really so related to what Celine was saying, and I felt similarly with the Bolter, that a lot of the sort of behavior of someone like that, which is kind of, dismissed as sort of, oh, she's this sort of larger than life, eccentric, sort of selfish person. And then you get into the kind of psychology of it and what's really going on, and you realize that somebody that has to, in those days, the only way that you could live a life that was exciting was through men. You couldn't have an independently exciting life or interesting life, really, as a woman, especially as an uneducated woman. There were starting to be a few very lucky women that could have had a tertiary education, but somebody like the Bolter wouldn't have had that. And so she her only real option for any kind of interesting life was through the man that she would marry. And if you happen to marry a man that isn't that interesting, then your only other option is to leave them and marry another one. And if you want a tool of an adventurous life, you have to go from man to man to man in order to have it. And in order to be able to then do that and get away with it without being kind of shamed or made to sort of, you know, yeah, literally sort of being shamed and pilloried as a sort of slut or whatever, you had to put on this kind of coat of armor, literally, like, you know, bangles and turbans and eyeliner and like a sort of a, and be defiant in your kind of, no, I'm not, yeah, I'm not a conventional woman, but screw you, this is who I am. And then that was the only way of becoming kind of, in a way, a roundabout way, accepted. But and so I just think it, yeah, well, there's always a reason for bad behavior, and or for bad behavior. Who, I mean, that's again what I loved about Nancy Mitford's novel and about that character, is that, you know, my father was a criminal defense barrister, and he would say things, his sort of education to me, as well as a writer, but was, you can be a good person and kill someone, and you can be an awful person and never get a parking ticket your whole life. And that's true. And that's, you know, it's the same. And that's why good writing and well-written characters are not just one thing. And what does it mean even to be good? Like, who, what does that even mean? You know, and so I think it's really awesome that with all of these characters that these brilliant actresses are playing, and you know, that there's, it's interrogating, every single one is interrogating the notion of what it is to be good in a way that's really cool.
You know, I'm an actress, and I am a Black person, and I think in the 80s and 90s there was this thing of, if you were a Black actress, you dare not go near a high-class prostitute or play a criminal, because we as Black artists had the added thing of trying to issue in change, societal change, right? Not just about, oh, this is a character I fancy playing. It's like our characters that we played did have an impact on other people's lives as well. So, you know, there was that dilemma of, well, okay, we must play business women now, successful middle class business women that haven't been anywhere near, you know, the darker side of life, and we, you know, I don't want to go down that route either, that bland route. But I think things feel a bit different now. It depends what the other, like Jessica, what her experience is. I think there's a wider variety of parts for younger Black actors now. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I feel like I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like in your experiences, having to like consider what it would mean to represent, you know, being a Black woman on TV. I feel like, yeah, I've not necessarily had to consider that, so I guess would mean that things are changing on camera, which is amazing, and through what I've experienced, and yeah, I think just in general, like like this whole conversation, I feel like my own personal career, like I do quite often play roles that are quite likable, and I am desperate to like just play, I don't know if I can swear, but like bitch, like I really just want to play someone bad and like gritty. And Talitha, like I was upset, I loved her from the start. Like there was not, I wanted to be her friend, like I kid you not, I was like, I want to get my nails painted green. I just love, I don't know, I think like, yeah, like 100%, like it, like being likable, just to add on to what everybody has said, isn't important. It's just, you know, it, almost in a way, I guess if an audience member like doesn't like you, then you're doing your job, right?